On behalf of Ipsos and our 19,000 employees around the world in over 90 countries, I'm pleased to announce two of my very great colleagues, James and Emmanuel. James, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming. It was great to mingle a little bit as we were getting started. I saw some people that I haven't seen in years, which was so much fun, and good to meet some new colleagues as well. And I don't live in LA, but I've spent lots of time in California, so I do really recognize the effort that some of you at least put into getting here tonight. So really, really appreciate it. We're so pleased you can be here. And just, it's so nice to be able to interact in person. It's just, we don't get to do it as much as we used to for most of us. So it's really nice to have that sort of face-to-face dialogue. So we've brought you here tonight, and we put a title together called Unlocking Brand Success, Change or Be Changed. I wanted to be a little bit ominous in the title because we all know how much the marketplace is changing, and I'm not going to drone on slide after slide to tell you how things have changed. I'll just show you a couple. But the world is really changing, and it's posing challenges and presenting opportunities for all of us that make a living in this space and manage brands or help people that are managing brands make good decisions. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the things that we've been seeing in the world. Of course, Ipsos is interviewing millions and millions of people every year all over the world, working for thousands of different companies. And we started seeing some really interesting things a couple of years ago. We've been working on a variety of different projects, R&D, et cetera, that we're going to share with you tonight, sort of what that's led to and why we thought it's an important moment to bring this to you. We're going to be in New York in a couple of weeks as well, but we wanted to show some love to our West Coast friends, so we decided to come to LA first. So to begin with, it really doesn't need a slide. The world is changing. There's been so many things that have happened, and I know researchers are terrible for this. If you work in research, we always say, oh, this is the next big thing, or yes, the next couple of years are going to be changing like never before, but really we all know this is an unprecedented time for all of us. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can see them on the screen, but from COVID to ChatGPT, which seems to be all the rage these days, there's been a lot of change, and it has an impact on our lives, on the people that we serve, on the customers that we connect with, on the companies that we work with. And I wanted to show this one slide. I saw it just, our global CEO put this up a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how many people have seen this, but this is the time to 1 million users. So how long it takes to get to 1 million users. And you know, we would think of Netflix. I don't think there's anybody here for Netflix, but 3.5 years, pretty fast. Airbnb, 2.5. Instagram, 1.5 months. ChatGPT did it in 5 days. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to get to 1 million users in less than a week. It was, you know, just incredible. That's just one example. We could do this all night, but I didn't want you to come all the way just to learn this. You can see that online. But it has real implications for us and for brands as well, because we're talking about the world changing, consumers changing, humans changing. And there's been a number of things that actually could impact brands, from the shift to e-commerce that was really started way before COVID, but was accelerated when COVID hit, because now people couldn't go out to the store and buy the things they needed, and you saw a step change in usage of platforms, from remote work and virtual collaboration, which not only has changed the habits of millions and millions of people, but also as we think about the way all of us work and the things that our companies had to learn, how to work together in teams in different environments, how to leverage technology, it's really created some challenges and, again, opportunities depending on whether you're glass half full or glass half empty kind of people. Increased focus on sustainability. I mean, I did work, for those of you who have gray hair like I do, years ago. Remember the RED initiative? That was really big. U2 got into it for Bono. And there was a lot of talk about sustainability, et cetera, and people liked to say it was important, but when you looked at what they actually did, it didn't actually pan out. It all came down to price and style, et cetera. But it's really becoming increasingly important. And I have 2 teenage daughters, and believe me, you know, they pay with their pocketbook here to brands that are supporting this. Reevaluation of brand values, especially important for us in the US here with all the social injustices that have happened over the years. There's I've noticed, I've been at this for 30 years now, an expectation now from companies to lean into these issues, to not sit on the sideline, to participate, to have a voice, to say something, to participate, rather than just sort of sit back and allow media to sort of carry the conversation. That poses opportunities and challenges for a lot of you. I'm sure you've dealt with it. You know, what do we say here? How do we say it? What do we want to say? What do we believe? And the role that we should be playing or not playing. There's a lot of criticism. Should brands get involved in these conversations or not? Really challenging things to deal with. And new marketing and advertising strategies, of course, that connect to all these things. As people are doing things differently from different places, it creates opportunities and challenges for all of us that are working in brand management. Now, interestingly, we've all grown up being told things. It starts with your parents, and then it evolves into other areas. But we've been told that brands can be measured through a combination of rational and emotional associations. That's typically the way most of us have learned to measure brands. But that's only part of the story, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We've also been told that brands need to be meaningfully different. They need to be mentally and physically available. They need to be loved, and we hear all sorts of things. But sometimes strong performance on these dimensions doesn't sync with your commercial realities. And we've all seen, you know, we've shown the data where, hey, we're doing really good on this index and our sales are going like that, and that's a hard conversation to have with the CEO. And we've also been told our whole lives, some shorter than others, that brands are dynamic. But I believe, and others, that it's not brands that are dynamic, it's the world around us that's dynamic and changing. And we can make a choice here, and it's really the question I want to pose to all of you here is, and why we invited you here is, you have a choice to make here as participants in marketing and branding. Are we going to shape the world around us? Are we going to lean into this? Are we going to be proactive? Or if not, we're going to be shaped by it. So, and I think you probably know where Ipsos lands on that particular challenge. There's an opportunity here for us to participate in these changes in a proactive way, to understand different ways of measuring brands, different ways of engaging with humans that can provide us some opportunities. So tonight we wanted to introduce Ipsos's new brand framework. It's built for the challenges that face us today. It's not a historical model that's existed for decades. It's built for 2023 and the things that we're facing. And really, Emmanuel's going to talk a little bit about this later. We started to see some really interesting things a couple of years ago, because we're doing millions and millions of interviews, and we started seeing some really interesting signals in the marketplace, and we've been working on this for some time, and it's time to start to introduce this to our friends and colleagues here about what we're learning and why we think it's so important. And really the message here is brands are no longer in control. Maybe they never were. I don't know, but you be the judge. So we have an intro video, and then Emmanuel's going to take it over and share the framework.
Brands are no longer in control. In a dynamic world, people are. At Ipsos, we help you understand the role your brand can play in people's lives. We uncover their unique context and what's important in their lives. We turn data into insights and strategies, which empower you to shape people's expectations, so only your brand can meet them.
Thank you, folks. I'm so excited to meet you all. We're going to keep it short because we have some major drinking to do, okay? Right? So not too many slides, but in all seriousness, we really want to engage in an interaction with you, in a conversation, more so than pitching slides, if you will, because we're all burnt out on PowerPoint slideshows. Two examples on screen to demonstrate that brands have to now co-create with the audience as opposed to being able to control the narrative. We have Cadbury on the left that started a chocolate bar, presumably to solved racism and faced a backlash from the community. Another example is from Pepsi a few years ago that had enlisted Kendall Jenner to address a Black Lives Matter protest. And for those of you who live in Los Angeles, Kendall Jenner grew up in Calabasas, and we've never seen a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Calabasas. On the right, we have Vaseline. Is that fair to say? So you may remember this backlash. On the right, we have Vaseline, very traditional brand that from a design standpoint, aesthetic hasn't evolved much over the last few years. And however, people on TikTok starting using Vaseline as part of their PM routine for, you seem familiar with that, for what we call slugging, yeah? To keep your skin. James, you struck me as
not quite yet.
Not quite yet. You're getting there.
I've taken note.
Those are two examples of brands that the audience and marketers can co-create, and we at Ipsos want to want to help brands guide towards this co-creation process. So this brand success framework, how to co-create, how to build brands that are successful and sustainable. 3 dimensions: expectations, context, and empathy. And the first one is about the opportunity for brands to help shape expectations. And what we mean by expectations is what people feel and know about the brand and the category. Now, almost all of us, let's assume all of us, are familiar with the functional and emotional benefits of a brand. That is what it does for you, what we call brand performance, and the emotion, brand desire. But we also want to consider other dimensions. The senses are becoming very important. As we spend more time with technology, we crave a sense of touch, for example. And in branding, that's what we call haptics. That's going to be a very important area. We also have the social aspect. That is, this brand, what does it say about me to my community, to my friends and family? And also some buying expectations. Where am I going to find the product? Is it going to be available? Am I going to be able to identify the product visually? So an example here is Rimmel. It's a client we have in Europe, and in the beauty category, they uncovered that people wanted cleaner brand for beauty products, brands that are more respectful of the environment and nature and the animals and so on and so forth. And what Rimmel did, based on the insights we provided, is develop that line of products and that campaign that's called Kind and Free, again with respect to the environment, the animals, no animal testing and so on and so forth. And the outcome is that 4.4% sales lift in 2021. Most importantly, in my opinion, it's the opportunity for the brand to educate shoppers about the category and what beauty will become in the future. So it's really this back and forth between the audience and the brand and the audience on educating and shaping expectations, if you will. So expectations are the root of all experiences, and you do expect the can of Coke to be round and red. You've been trained to recognize this can, and that's why you can identify the can in less than 1 second on the shelf. Also, that is, I don't want the kitten. That looks expensive. Ipsos is going to tell me if I break it. Right? So labeling is so important, the design of a product. That is why you expect this bottle of wine to, its content, I should say, to taste much better than a unmarked bottle. Or that is how Apple device makes me feel. So perception is the truth, right? Whereby this product is going to convey something about me and about my personal identity. It's going to convey some emotions. And the opportunity for the brand is to shape expectations towards what those emotions and what those feelings should be. Second dimension is context. Context is about the world we live in, what's happening around us. And it influences our expectations we have for the category or the brand. And you know, an easy example, think about Starbucks. If you go to Starbucks in the morning, you might want to grab some coffee to get a jolt of caffeine and maybe a pastry because you're hungry and you need some calories to start the day. If you go back to Starbucks at 3 p.m., maybe you're going to end up enjoy an indulgence like a frappuccino and a moment to meet with friend or to meet with a business partner. So it's going to be the same store, but a different relationship and a different expectation you will have towards the brand. Two types of context. The macro context is really the world around us. Those are the societal issues. Think of sustainability, making a positive impact on economic recovery after COVID, for example. And there is an opportunity for brands to do the right thing. We can talk about it over cocktails later on. And the micro contexts are what's happening really around you, where, when, with whom. And I think the Starbucks example here speaks for itself. So what does this mean for marketers? It's to consider those macro trends. There is an opportunity here, again, around responsible consumption, upcycling, recycling, responsible consumerism, brand advocacy, sustainability, economic recovery, and so on and so forth. And also the specific contexts or the specific micro moments when people are going to make decisions about the category and about your brand. So for marketers, for brands, there's really an opportunity to investigate that white space and harness those opportunities with new products or, if anything, with new messaging around your existing products. What we see in our study is the category benefits, again, the functional benefits. Those are still very important. You expect bleach to clean your kitchen and toothpaste to whiten your teeth. That's fine. But we see also that 35% of the decision has to do with the societal benefits. Again, is this brand, is this company, is this product going to make a positive impact on society, on the world around me? And here we have an example of a client, Babbel, that sells a language learning app. And so across all markets, we saw that people turn to a language learning app for the learning opportunity. If I learn a new language, I'm going to seize new opportunities. So that's the big idea across markets. However, what we saw is depending on the market, different people from different cultures aspire to different things. In the UK, it's going to be about diversity. In France, people are going to learn languages to be more self-confident. In Germany, it's going to be about a personal identity project, personal fulfillment. In Brazil, for example, it's going to be about a professional boost to advance my career. And that's to say that the same brand has the same overarching big idea across markets, yet some differences depending on the context, the country people live in. I keep clicking this way, which is really dumb because the clicker was at the back of the room, right? Okay, last one is empathy. And empathy means that we want to understand what's important to people and how brands can add to their lives. Again, I truly believe that there is an opportunity for brands to do the right thing, not just sell products, but contribute to the lives of people. Now, in marketing, in market research and advertising, we're bubbled. And what I mean by this is we know so much about our products and our categories, we tend to lose sight of the real people, the ones buying the product. And empathy means really understanding and listening to our audiences and gain what we call at Ipsos a total understanding of this audience. And brands really need to be empathetic in order to shape expectations, in order to understand, convince their audience, and establish a long-term, sustainable, meaningful relationship with the audience. Without getting into details, it's too late to get into deep scientific research, and we can discuss offline. But what we see is brands need two things in their creative executions, in their advertisements. That is something that's very creative, what we may call distinctive brand assets, something that people will recognize in terms of the colors, in terms of the characters, maybe in terms of the sounds, but also they need to demonstrate empathy. And what we see is brands that combine creativity and empathy perform better than the ones that do not. Now, what's next? I told you it would be short. See, I don't lie. Right? What's next? This is the framework, the foundation of this brand success model. And at Ipsos, we have a lot of research underway to strengthen this network, this framework, and to bring more examples to you and more data so that we can scale this framework with new tools, new methodologies across a wide range of brands, because not all brands are created equal, and we don't believe in a cookie cutter approach. We believe in a very custom approach. So we want, depending on the brand and depending on the environment and the market, we are going to fine-tune and customize this framework for you across those 3 dimensions of expectations, context, and empathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll move forward now with a fireside chat with my friend Christine. And James and Christine, maybe if you want to briefly introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Christine Florkel. So I met a few people before. This is great. I think I'm one of the only agency people here. So on the agency side, I work at Lucid, which is Amazon's dedicated media agency powered by Initiative. So I think a lot of you've probably heard of Initiative or Media Brands, the parent company. So I've been at Rufus for about a year, and prior to that I was at UN for several years across entertainment. So I've worked across a lot of entertainment, Sony Pictures, Hulu, tech clients. I've been across Charles Schwab in San Francisco, so you name it, I've probably been on the category. That's the great thing about agency side. But so excited to be in all of your presence and be with my brand friends tonight. So it is a night off for me. I have 2 kids, so I have 2 kids under 4, so I'm like, this is a night off. So let's talk advertising. So yeah, I hope the wine is flowing and this is kind of an interactive discussion, but I think we were gonna just chat through some of the questions, and I'm gonna share some experiences from advertising side or from agency side about the construct.
And thank you again for coming here, although with 2 kids at home, it wasn't hard to convince Chris.
Yeah, said bye. My husband's at home. He's on duty.
So I don't think we need the chairs. It would be stuffy.
yeah,
We can just stand up. And I'll start with a question for you. So Christine, what's exciting, as you said, is you worked with such a wide range of brands and categories. And the first one will be from your experience working with advertisers. Do advertisers realize that they no longer dictate the narrative, that they no longer control the narrative to their audience?
I think, and I'll look to you guys to answer that too, but I think they realize it, yes. I think it's been hard to miss over the past 3 years that we don't have control, brands don't have control anymore, but I think no one's alone in feeling like, what do we do with that? How do we address consumers being in control? So I feel like if anyone thinks they're alone out there, you're not, and it's a tough thing to deal with, but also an opportunity. That's the other thing I would say with that is I think a lot of our clients feel like, yes, we're not in control anymore, and that's a scary thing, but I would just encourage it to flip that. Like it can actually be a really great thing if we relinquish some of that control. I think it's pushed us into a new era. So that would be my answer to that question.
How do you feel about brand co-creation? And we saw examples of brands that do very, very well. Vaseline harnessed the power of influencers. I'm thinking in the alcohol category, for example, brands also do very well working with hip-hop artists, for example, harnessing their audience, especially in cognac, right? For example, those maybe are anecdotal, unfortunately. So how do you feel your advertiser clients, how well do they do at harnessing the power of the audience, if you will?
Depends on the client. I think there's a level of some brands feel more comfortable with it, and I think it depends on category. Other brands are really nervous about it. I mean, because it's a scary thing. It's we've all seen what happens when it goes wrong, and that's what I'm saying about like, can we now move out of that phase of being scared of letting go control and being, all right, we're going to move into this new era together. I have an example because I was thinking as you were presenting this. An example of, I was just listening to a podcast, because that's the good thing about going back in the office is you have your commutes back and you can listen to podcasts again. But I was listening to kind of recaps of Advertising Week, and Target was one of the keynote speakers, or one of the speakers at Advertising Week, and they brought in Tabitha Brown, to talk about her collaboration with Target and why that works so well. And I just was blown away by what Tabitha had to say about it. She basically talked about, it feels like I'm at the board table. It's not a creator influencer kind of relationship. It's a, I'm part of the family. And the way she talked about it, and I should, if anyone wants this podcast, like reach out to me. It was so impactful, and I think there's a lot to learn from it. She actually was saying that when Target came to her, they gave her a bit of a like, hey, talk about this. But they didn't edit her script. They didn't tell her to change anything. She's like, I'm gonna do Tabitha and I'm just gonna send it. And she kept talking about, I'm on my freedom walk of like, this is who I'm gonna be as an influencer. Like, I'm gonna use my influence in the way that I wanna use it. And I thought it was really impressive how she talked about Target just saying, okay, I got no changes. And she's like, what do you mean you've got no changes? Like, I've never heard that from a brand. And they said, well, we asked you to co-create with us, so do that. Like, and it has been so successful for them. She creates clothing lines, she creates all sorts of things. And so the point, as you were kind of presenting, that I thought this is really interesting about co-creation is that working with an influencer or someone who kind of sits at the board table with you like that and is part of the marketing family is a way in where you don't have to be so, you don't have to kind of talk to regular consumers, if you will. You don't have to kind of delve into like general UGC that can user-generated content that can feel a little bit scary and kind of unhinged at times. You can, work with a creator who embodies your audience as well as a way to, kind of co-create on behalf of the audience, if you will. So I just thought that was a great example, a lot to learn from Target and what they're doing. I shouldn't say that as Amazon was one of my main clients, but they're doing a good job. Target was doing a good job with the
We won't tell
creator
them.
side.
Yeah. So consumer expectations. I mean, this has been an insane, really, let's be honest, a few years for all of us. So how do you feel from your clients and what you've seen, how do you feel that consumer expectations have changed over these past few years, especially, since COVID?
Yeah, I think consumer expectations are you get in my community or get out, depending on what community you're talking to. It could be anything from a community like Black or Hispanic or young adult. It could be the gaming community, like a passion-based community. Whatever the community is, I think the expectations are now no longer, oh, you can just kind of show up here. It's you have to be, like you have to understand it. And I think a good example that we were talking even pre-COVID was, I'll use gaming as an example. They're so quick to kick you out if you don't understand the slang that they're using and the way, the functionality, within Twitch, for example. If you don't get it, they're quick to, call bullshit, basically. And I think that is the same for any community that we're talking about. So to me, that has become, when we talk about consumers being in control, they're like, get out. Like if you're not understanding us, get out. So to me, that's been one of the biggest shifts that I've noticed.
Yeah, I get that from my two teenage daughters quite a bit. They're a lot. They call me Yo Boomer a lot, and I'm like, I'm not a boomer, and I can't tell you how many times I've had that discussion with them. There's a cutoff. Your dad is before the cutoff, but they just.
Actually, if we can speak in examples, I have
Yeah.
a couple other examples of that I think are kind of telling. So we've been trying to get, this is the empathy piece, like we've been trying to get better at, we're obviously all, in the data field, research field here, so forgive me, but talking to people. Data does help us understand about people, it doesn't fully close the loop on knowing people. So I just encourage our teams to talk to people as well. One of the things that we've just implemented that's been already, it started as something little and it's become this big thing, is we call it Rufus Hears, but it's basically having a panel across different types of communities. So right now we have Hispanic, Black, and young adult. Young adult's quite easy on the agency side. It's pretty much everyone. And having a panel of people that we can easily tap and say, hey, can you answer a quick survey about this? Can you do a roundtable about this? And we just did this for Amazon actually on a campaign that they were still in creative phases for. And they said, hey, like we're kind of working through the, the concept, but there's still wiggle room with it. Can you help us figure out the right context and connecting that with context and empathy of the community? And we're like, well, let's just kind of tap into this panel and have a quick discussion about it. Brought him in literally to a room, talked about it, and got so much that you couldn't quite get from just the first level of data. And it sounds so obvious, but I think there's a pendulum of kind of data and really talking to people. And it was little things like, that humor would work for general market, but that joke would not land with me. Just because you used a person of color in that ad doesn't mean that the joke was right. So there were those little things that they were literally saying, let's make sure that we have the people that we're speaking to in the decision-making process. So again, it's all stuff I think we've talked about, but just always a good reminder that you get something every time you talk to a human being. And I think that's where the empathy part comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been a rough few years as well, and really understanding that from a company perspective and a brand perspective. Like, it's been a rough road, and recognizing that and the role that all of us can play in sort of helping make their lives easier, or at least recognize the things that they've been through. We spoke about expectations across different channels: sensorial, social, functional, emotional, etc. How do advertisers fulfill various expectations from your perspective? You talked a little bit about it. Or do you see them focusing mostly on features and benefits? Or are you seeing some evolution with some of your clients in addressing some of those other dimensions that we talked about today?
I was thinking about this as you showed the Coke example earlier about all of those different kind of sensorial functional ways. And does anyone know the brand Liquid Death? The water. If you don't follow everything they do in marketing, you should. Like, it's just, again, podcasts, because I listen to podcasts, but that was another one that I was listening to the VP of Creative talk about Liquid Death and just kind of the thought process behind that. And to me, that was the perfect example around shaping expectations. I think it's hard to do, so that's why I'm using them as example, because they're kind of the holy grail of reshaping expectations of a category. But it made me think of this example because they literally took, their whole goal, right, is to bring new audiences into sustainability, which I didn't know that until I dug a little bit deeper, but that's their whole goal. And safe to say they're doing it. And I think a lot of us probably remember that brand from, I think it was last year, they had a Super Bowl ad that was like pregnant women chugging Liquid Death and kids chugging Liquid Death. And it was very like confronting. Like, what is this? Because it looked like alcohol. It looked like a hard seltzer or a beer or something like that. And I just think since then, building kind of brand awareness, they've really expanded like what the category is. Like, they're not competing against other water. The creative guy was saying their choice to have it in a can was because all their water competitors put it in a clear plastic bottle because you need to associate purity with being able to see it, right? And they're like, yeah, but then we're part of the problem. We're literally creating an island of plastic out in the ocean. So why don't we change that? So every little thing in their brand DNA was about rethinking the category. So it's fascinating. And they were talking about also from kind of a functional and social standpoint, a lot of their content is like $2,000 to make. Like, it's cheap when we're thinking about budgets these days. And so they're really kind of flipping everything we know about marketing on their head. And I thought that was just a great example.
Yeah.
One other thing that impressed me about them is they actually have people tattoo. They're like, you're a brand if you can get someone to tattoo your brands on their body. And he said they've already started having people do that. And so the CEO then tattooed this ultra fan's face on his body. And there it goes. That's some co-creation right there. Bringing it full circle. And but have I gone off your script? I told
that
him
was
before,
great.
like, stop me, I can go long with it.
Well, it's actually a good segue. Liquid Death, in my understanding, in my view, was really built around purpose, and that's the only thing that's easier for a small brand than it is for a big brand, whereby they don't have to convert to sustainability of brand purpose. So we spoke about macro and micro context for people, and in macro, remember, we spoke about sustainability and purpose and economic recovery and all that. In your experience of working with clients on allocating advertising marketing dollars, how do they look at allocating dollars towards the macro versus micro context? And adjacent question is, how do clients look at investing in the brand in contrast with, I didn't want to say as opposed, in contrast with investing in the lower funnel in terms of driving clicks and sales tomorrow morning?
This is a conversation we're having day in and day out, because this is another thing I feel like I wish there was a magic answer to say, oh, these clients and brands got it exactly right. But I feel like even since, as economic times get even tougher, like this is a conversation we're having constantly of, hey, can you help us figure out how much should I have allocated towards brand versus demand? And anecdotally, I should say empirically from research, 60-40 is the general rule. 60 to brand, 40 to demand, depending on your category, up and down. But I certainly don't think that that's a hard and fast, and I definitely feel like a lot of clients have struggled. You might allocate the money, in a certain way, but I'm not seeing as much, and I say this as a crusade and a campaign, like, can we get better at bringing brand teams together at the same table with performance teams? I don't think we're doing that very well. So we get down to the kind of budgetary split, but where I see it work the best and actually drive results, like incremental results when those budgets are working together, is when you have brand teams actually sharing with the performance teams what they're doing. And it, again, sounds like brilliant basics, but it really is. So I think, to me, those are the clients that I've worked with that do the best, have brand teams at the same seat as their CRM teams, as their email marketing teams, and their linking up efforts. So again, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, and you guys are probably telling your teams to do the same thing, but to me, that's the first step.
So we'll move forward with empathy now. And remember, I said that I believe a lot of marketers are bubbled, and by the way, I plead guilty of listening to the same podcasts you do, by the way, but spending time with people in our industry and the publications we read and all that. And of course, as an outcome, we know so much more about the category and the products that our consumers and customers and prospects do. So my question to you is, in your experience working with clients, are they truly capturing the voice of the consumer? Do they see their product, their brand, their category through the lens of, forgive this choice of words, but the average shopper? Or do you really feel that bias of this overwhelming knowledge of the category that nobody knows as much about their product as they do?
I feel like I don't want to, it depends on the brand, it depends on the client. I think I've seen a variety. I think the short answer is no. I don't think that we're doing as well as we could be as an industry on showing understanding of lived experiences with, I think we talk a lot about the product, and we'll talk to consumers about how do you use my product, when do you use it, usage occasions. It's all the marketing jargon that we all are guilty of using, but we don't do as much understanding lived experiences and the role that we can play within the experience. I think we can flip the order versus kind of going straight into, well, how do you use my product, to how do you live your life? How do you, what are your experiences, and therefore finding new ways to fit seamlessly into that versus trying to shoehorn a product in a way that isn't gonna cut it in their cultural context.
Yeah, that's a great point. You've worked across a whole variety of different clients and media channels. Do you feel that some are better at conveying empathy than others? I mean, I remember reading, there was a study done about 30 years ago about, I think it was called The Medium is Part of the Message, this idea that you could sort of, depending on where you were, it actually influenced. But in your experience, do you think, which channels are better or not at conveying empathy? Or is it all about just having a great creative idea and it'll work, on whatever channel they put it on?
I think if you have a great creative idea and you're saying the right thing, it can work. But if I use an analogy of my toddlers at home, if I'm just saying something to them, that's not empathetic to gentle parenting, if anyone follows the gentle parenting. If I'm just telling her, like, do this, think this, it's not an empathetic interaction. And I think in many ways it's the same in marketing. And trying to be able to create a little bit more of an interactive dialogue. So to me, from a channel perspective, things that are one way, like TV, don't have as much opportunity to do that. It's one way. So if you get the messaging right, sure, I think it can kind of be a manifesto. But I think from an channels that offer an interactive dialogue are always gonna, they can be scary as well, because the conversation comes right back. Yeah. My toddler tells me right back what she thinks of me. But that's kind of how I would answer that, is you can get by with a great big idea. But I think the more you can get the interactivity in, the better the conversation directly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll have a few minutes to take questions from the audience. Next time, you come back with your kids. Okay? Do that. So questions from the folks in the audience. We'd be happy to hear from you and address questions on the fly. Yes?
I wanted to ask a little bit more about your last point in having a message resonate. Thank you. I wanted to just dig in a little bit more to your last point about building empathy and using the right channels and the right engagement. Just maybe if you have an example of a brand like Liquid Death, for example, that was able to build that empathy. Could you talk a little bit more about the tactics of how they did that?
Yeah, I could talk about Liquid Death a little bit. So I think one good example from Liquid Death specifically, because I'm a super fan, obviously, is their choice of creators or influencers that they use and personalities. They understood that they kept their kind of brand purpose always at the heart of trying to get new people into sustainability. So everyone that they spoke with had empathy with a particular audience, right? So they had Martha Stewart as one of their kind of spokespeople. They had Tony Hawk. They had Wiz Khalifa, who used Liquid Death as bong water. They had, talk about purity, I guess. There was another one that I thought was really good. But I think that, to me, was a good example of selective, careful selection of who you want. They might be completely unconventional, but careful selection and focusing on the return of the relationship with those influencers, and kind of choosing based less on reach and more on passion for your product. They will give you so much more if they love. I think it was Steve-O. Steve-O was the other one that they had as a brand ambassador. And more of a creator, he was creating content on his own channels, and I guess he was going all out, just putting his own content out there without being paid because he loved it. And it was the same with Tabitha Brown doing it for Target. That was one of the other things they said. She's like, I'm happy. If I see something in my day-to-day, just post about it. So that's where I think empathy can also come from, that trust in your creators and the people that you're working with, and just kind of allowing them to, choosing them based on passion, because they're going to do more for you. And it's going to come across as a lot more genuine. I almost said authentic, and I told myself I was not going to use that word today. Comes across as a lot more genuine because they care about the brand. So you're hearing me talk a lot about creators today, but I think that is the way into empathy and context right now.
And to add to this, the opportunity with creators is to reduce the social distance between the creator and the audience. This, however, only works if we empower the creator to create the messaging and to appropriate the brand so that it resonates with the audience, or else it becomes just yet another pushy ad that's unrelatable and mismatch between the creator and the audience. So I think that's what Liquid Death is doing so well.
I think also from a channel standpoint, it doesn't have to be creators. I think it can be understanding how a person wants to receive that message. If it's, let's say, feminine hygiene products, you don't necessarily, I've always thought that's funny being on TV. It's just not the most empathetic place to talk about feminine hygiene products. But you might think about a more empathetic environment like audio, where it's in your ear and it's a more personal human voice that you're hearing. Like, I think there's little things about just thinking about what you're communicating and who all would be seeing it and consuming it. So just another example I thought of.
Thank you. Yes.
Does the high empathy strategy lend itself more to like new and return guests, or do you think, like, when I'm thinking about like high frequency, getting somebody in over and over again, seeing that same empathetic message seems really like top funnel approach. So like, how do you see that strategy funneling itself down to repeat conversion, or does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's in an audience of where we're talking about measurement. We have measurement experts in the room. It's a tough one to measure down the funnel, but I definitely think, you know, if you get a loyal fan base and you get people through the door with empathy, they're more likely. I mean, I'm speaking anecdotally, but I think they're more likely to stick around and have repeat purchase. But let's task Ipsos with that, and they can tell us.
Yeah, my answer to this will be frequency of exposure is one thing, but is the individual going to be exposed always to the same message? So if it's always the exact same message, it becomes redundant and loses some impact. However, if we adapt the message across platform and share the same big idea for the brand, but through different channels, through different spokespersons, influencers, and formats, we get all the benefit from frequency of exposure, which is like 12 times, 15 times, right? That's ideal, with consideration for the complexity of that consumer journey and those different channels that people get in touch with.
Yeah. I also think empathy for me is not just about messaging, right? True empathy, in my opinion, is really understanding the lives of the people that you're serving, right? And part of it is messaging and how you talk to them, but part of it, if you think about, I did a lot of work in the experience space as the pandemic was starting, and recognizing the challenges that people faced in getting products or having to line up at the store or put masks on, you know, in environments, or not being able to find the products they wanted. So empathy for me is part message, but it's also part recognizing the context and the lives that your consumers are living in and how that changes over time, and then figuring out how you're going to participate in that in a way that you really understand them rather than. So I think it goes beyond just advertising and messaging into broader context.
And knowing when not to participate.
Right, exactly.
Knowing
Right, that's right.
We don't always have to participate.
Yeah.
We'll take one more.
We had one in the back on the
We have
couch.
one at the back.
It's more of a statement. Just do everything Nike does.
Do everything Nike does.
Nike does such a phenomenal job at waiting and purpose, and they're a shoe, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's essentially, and there's a movie coming out about the Jordan and how that was created, but they do such a phenomenal job, and they have their kind of innovation stuff sits on the edge, and they understand how performance needs to work, and performance needs to work in support of the purpose of the brand. So you have to be there at the exact moment you need to buy the thing, but you need to have a sense of purpose. You need to align with the people and the purpose that aligns with your audiences. And they segment really well too, and they sub-segment really well. So and then it depends on also the brand maturity, right? Like the awareness and the comfort and the safety that the person has with your brand. But Nike never stops. And I have nothing to do with Nike, by the way, like nothing at all.
Full disclosure.
But they just never stop being relevant and serving a purpose to us, both emotionally, practically, and socially, which leans really nicely into your framework.
Yeah.
And to add to this, Nike doesn't try to be everything for everyone. And I think that's a mistake too many brands make, that they try to market to everyone. Nike does not hold any more than 20% market share in any of the categories they play in. And they also know that they lean blue, and that's fine. They capitalize on this instead of trying to broadcast a one-size-fits-all type of message. Thank you so much for...